Jesus accepted his call to ministry at 30. He had been in carpentry since he was 13. He ran the family business since he was 17. At the risk of being heretical tonight, might I suggest to you that 85% of Jesus' life, he was out of order. "85% of his life, he was doing what he was not called to do." God, y'all done got quiet. For 85% of his life, he was not flowing in his God-given function. 85% of his life, he is doing what his natural father wanted. But it did not line up with his divine DNA. For 85% of his life, and he's anointed, he's called, he's chosen, and he's wrong.
Jesus was wrong 85% of his life? We got to get into this topic right here on Keeping It in Context. Now, this video should be short, but I think the subject is worth mentioning given the fact that there's a bold claim being made about Jesus and it is being promoted in the ears of those who've already heard it and those who will hear it in the future. And that is that 85% of Jesus's life was wrong. Now, before we delve more into this claim, one thing I do want to point out first is that when it comes to the matter of preaching and teaching about the life of Jesus Christ and what we find in the scriptures, one of the most important things that one must do is to stay as factual and to stay as truthful to the life of Jesus Christ and the scriptures as one can. Yes, preaching and teaching can be brought about by illustrations. We know that because Jesus used parables and illustrations in his teaching and preaching. Yes, you can use creative approaches, but any illustration or any creative approach must be properly tailored to ensure that the facts and the truth about the life of Jesus Christ and the scriptures is maintained. Not doing so will not only cause a lack of integrity towards the individuals who are teaching and preaching, but also will cause heretical doctrines to be created and a false understanding or misunderstanding about Jesus Christ and the scriptures. Now, the full sermon link will be placed in the description below so that you can watch the entire sermon for yourself. But what you've just heard in this clip, what we're talking about, this particular bold claim, is a perfect example of what happens when a person chooses not to maintain the truthfulness and facts about the life of Jesus Christ or the scriptures, but rather choose to sensationalize Jesus' life in order to bring about their personal points. In an attempt to be creative in delivering a sermon about being in the wrong place in life for years, but finally getting the opportunity to move on from that wrong place, the preacher here, Jamal Bryant, decides to use Jesus' earthly life as an example of that. Let's go back to the clip once again.
At the risk of being heretical tonight, might I suggest to you that 85% of Jesus' life, he was out of order. "85% of his life, he was doing what he was not called to do."
All right, so the first issue with what he says is that 85% of Jesus's life was out of order and that the things that he was doing was not what he was called to do. Now, if Jesus is both God and man according to the scriptures, both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, how could he be out of order for 85% of his life? How could Jesus, for 85% of his life, be out of step or out of line with the will of God. If Jesus is both God and man, how could he at any point in time not be doing what he was called to do? I mean, it was God's will that Jesus would be born by Mary, who would be espoused to Joseph. God sovereignly chose that specific couple for Jesus to be raised by. He knew Mary was a virgin, and he also knew Joseph was a carpenter. And so growing in a carpenter's home and more than likely doing carpentry work as a personal trade, as an apprentice of his father, would not have been a mistake or something he was not called to do. Being a carpenter, which in the Greek is tekton, which can be translated as a builder or a skilled craftsman or a handyman, would actually be perfect for Jesus, given that they all truly represent the work and the ability of Jesus. The fact that Jesus is a builder, he is a skilled craftsman, he is a handyman, someone who can fix anything he puts his hands to, especially people like you and me. Just take a look at John chapter 1, starting in verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He, speaking of Jesus Christ, was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. To say that Jesus was out of order or was doing things that he was not called to do is to completely undermine the deity of Christ and the sovereign will of God, which not only sounds heretical, as Mr. Bryant does admit before even saying it, but is in fact heretical and it is extremely dangerous. But he continues.
85% of his life, he was not flowing in his God-given function.
Like, what does this even mean? How is Jesus not flowing in his God-given function? What function was he supposed to be flowing in? His God-given function and flow was already explained to us in Philippians chapter 2 and starting in verse 5. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, as he already existed in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a bondservant and being born in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death on a cross. For this reason, also God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus Christ every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. From the very beginning of his incarnation, Jesus functioned and was flowing exactly the way that he was supposed to. And as a result of operating in his function and flow, which was an obedient and humbled servant, God the Father granted Jesus with exaltation. What Mr. Bryant's statement is trying to imply then is that Jesus should actually have been doing the exact opposite. Instead of remaining a humbled servant and starting his earthly ministry at the age of 30, which he did, and instead of waiting for the proper time for his inauguration of being revealed as the Messiah at his baptism, Jesus really should have just left his carpentry work and started performing all the miracles, healings, and he should have been preaching everywhere and announcing his messiahship the minute that he was able to speak. But this would actually cause him to go against his God-given function and would have caused him to err into sin, something that he would not have done anyway. And so to say that 85% of his life he was not flowing in his God-given function literally makes no sense from any logical or scriptural perspective. And it is why it's so heretical. It is a heretical statement to make. But he continues.
85% of his life, he is doing what his natural father wanted. But it did not line up with his divine DNA.
Again, there's absolutely no proof of such, and neither does it make any sense. Jesus was not just doing whatever his natural father wanted him to do, as if he had no power, as if Joseph wielded this amount of authority over Jesus that if Jesus wanted to go over here and do ministry, that Joseph would say, well, no, you can't. You better go back into the carpentry shop and build some more chairs and make sure you keep this carpentry business going. That wasn't the case. Jesus was always doing the will of God. He was always doing what he was supposed to be doing. To say that the influence of Joseph is the reason why 85% of Jesus' life was wrong is just heretical.
85% of his life, and he's anointed, he's called, he's chosen, and he's wrong.
And once again, nowhere and no one with sense believes that Jesus was wrong at any point of his earthly life. To be wrong means to be out of line, to be incorrect, to have error, to be inaccurate. What this preacher has done and will continue to do is to sensationalize the life of Jesus and his entire sermon in order to provide shock value to those listening in order to gain a desired response from the audience.
For 30 years, Bishop, he's wrong. He's out of order. We've flown here from all over the country, not because of what he did for 30 years, but for what he did in 3. My time is up. I'm just supposed to give the homily tonight, but I just came to prophesy to 50 of y'all in here. I hope you're ready for what's going to happen in the next 3 years. God, I can't hear nobody. He's going to give you what eyes have not seen, what ears have not heard.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is not sound preaching. And as I stated in the beginning, one of the most important things that one must do when teaching and preaching about the life of Jesus Christ and the scriptures is just to be as factual and truthful as one can. When the motive of preaching and using the illustrations and creative approaches while preaching is anything other than that, you will run the risk of teaching and preaching things that are simply unbiblical, and you will lead people astray. This is also why we are admonished to test and to see whether what is being taught and preached to us is either genuine or accurate. Just because a person has great oratorial skills, charisma, theological degrees, does not mean that they will automatically share with us what is biblically sound. 1 John chapter 4 and verse 1 says, "Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see if they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world." Acts chapter 17 and verse 11 says, "The people here were of more noble character than those in Thessalonica, since they received the word with eagerness and examined the scriptures daily to see if these things were so." As followers of Jesus Christ, this is no one else's responsibility except for you and for me. All right, that's it for this video. If you like the content, please like, share, leave some comments below. Let me know your thoughts on whether or not 85% of Jesus's life was in fact wrong, out of order, and he was not flowing in his God-given function. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to speed when I drop a new video. And as always, as you go back to study that word, just remember to remind yourself that as I'm studying the word, I got to make sure I keep everything in context.